Hidden Valley Kings. Okay, when you hear that name, maybe you're picturing, I don't know, rolling hills, maybe some kind of medieval thing.
Yeah, it's definitely not what first comes to mind for a Charlotte gang.
Exactly. It's such a contrast with the reality we're actually going to explore today. We're talking about a gang based right here in Charlotte, but with these surprising roots going back to Chicago and a very local nickname connection, too.
That contrast is, I think, part of what makes this story pretty compelling, right? The name sounds almost peaceful, which is, well, it's deceptive given what they were involved in.
Absolutely. And that's really what this deep dive is all about for you listening. You've brought us some great material, and we're going to try and really get a handle on the Hidden Valley Kings. Where did they come from? What did they do? The key moments that really define them here in Charlotte.
Hmm.
So by the end, hopefully you'll have a really clear picture of this group.
Yeah, and our main source for digging into this is the Wikipedia entry on the Hidden Valley Kings. It gives a pretty good overview, from when they started right through to the police actions against them.
Okay.
And importantly, it points to other stuff too, like an episode of Gangland and some news articles. So it feels like a solid starting point for our chat.
Good stuff. So we're basically aiming to pull out the most important bits, the origins, the activities, those crucial points in their history, but, without getting totally bogged down in every single detail.
Exactly, just the key takeaways.
Okay, let's dive in then. Where does this story actually begin? The Hidden Valley Kings story, I mean.
Well, it starts right here in Charlotte, North Carolina. We're talking late 1990s, maybe early 2000s.
Hmm?
But the Hidden Valley Kings, they didn't just sort of appear out of nowhere.
Right.
They actually grew out of an earlier gang called the Queen City Kings.
Ah, the Queen City Kings. That's obviously a nod to Charlotte's nickname, the Queen City.
Precisely.
Where did they get started?
So they formed up in the Cedar Green housing complex. That's east of the Hidden Valley neighborhood, kind of near where Craighead Avenue hits North Tryon Street.
Okay.
And here's where it gets, well, a little murky. The exact origins of the Queen City Kings, they're actually debated, even by people who were apparently involved.
Oh, really? How so? What are the different versions?
Well, the Wikipedia source suggests that the Queen City Kings sort of popped up
Yeah.
almost simultaneously through bringing together people from both the People Nation and the Folk Nation.
Yeah, okay.
These were folks who'd moved to Charlotte from Chicago, probably in the early to mid-90s.
Now the Chicago connection again. So People Nation, Folk Nation, those are like huge alliances of gangs from Chicago, right?
Yeah.
Started in the prison system.
Exactly, big umbrella groups. So the idea was there was maybe a smaller group first in Cedar Green, but they wanted to bring in more influences under what they called the Supreme King Queen Nation. So they decided to unite as the Queen City Kings.
Right, unifying these Chicago gang members here in Charlotte.
Yeah.
And that name, Queen City Kings, it wasn't just descriptive, was it? It sounds like they were making a real statement.
Oh, definitely. The sources actually quote some guys identified as original kings saying pretty bluntly, the Queen City is our bitch, which makes us the kings.
Wow. Okay, that's direct.
Yeah, very forceful. A clear claim they wanted to run things in Charlotte. It's quite a statement. Did the sources mention how others reacted to that kind of talk?
That is strong stuff. And the word kings itself, didn't it have another meaning initially beyond just, ruling the city?
That's right. At first, KINGS was actually an acronym. It stood for Knowledgeable Islamic Nubian Gods. That later got tweaked slightly to Crucial Islamic Nubian Gods.
Yeah.
So it suggests there was this effort to give the gang a kind of specific identity, maybe a bit of a philosophy behind it.
Interesting. Like they were trying to build something unique, drawing on Chicago, obviously, but you mentioned something surprising earlier, Los Angeles influences, too.
Yeah, that's a curious detail. They use terms like original king and baby king.
Instead of OG and BG.
Exactly, which are much more common, especially with Chicago roots. All right. Using original king and baby king does hint that maybe they were looking at, or at least adopting some terminology from, LA gang culture, too.
Huh.
It's kind of a weird mix, isn't it? Blending these different regional gang traditions.
A real hybrid, yeah. And what about colors? That's always a big identifier for gangs.
For the main Queen City Kings group, the sort of universal color was generally agreed to be black.
Black. Okay. So black for the overall Queen City Kings, but then how did the Hidden Valley Kings specifically come out of that larger structure? You said that Queen City Kings had these different, like, local chapters.
Sets, exactly. Sets, or empires, the source calls them. Just like you see with bigger gangs in Chicago having different factions tied to specific neighborhoods, the Queen City Kings developed these smaller, more geographic groups.
Makes sense.
And Wikipedia page lists a whole bunch of them. Wilmore Kings, Tuckasegee Kings, Beatties Ford Kings, Maple Run Kings,
Yeah.
Northside Jamaican Kings, Town Kings or FOC,
Mm,
Cedar Green Kings, Woodview Kings.
quite a few.
Yeah, and then, of course, the Hidden Valley Kings, who became the most prominent. There were even whispers of a Death Valley Kings group down in Polkton, North Carolina, and maybe even factions popping up more recently in Miami and Rock Hill, South Carolina.
So potentially a pretty wide network, at least at one point. But okay, out of all those, the Hidden Valley Kings somehow rose to the top in terms of recognition. Why them specifically? What pushed them into the spotlight?
Well, it seems like a few things came together. They definitely built up some local notoriety on their own,
Mm-hmm.
but their profile got a massive boost from that Gangland TV episode, the one called Killing Snitches. That put them on the national radar, really.
Right. Getting featured on a show like Gangland would absolutely do that. It's a strange kind of fame, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Exposing crime, but also maybe amplifying the group's image?
It is strange. And then there was that other really weird connection the source mentioned, the online gaming thing.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that again. That was wild.
It really was. Apparently, because they were seen as having relatively small numbers, and because they used the color green, which we'll get back to, it's tied to the neighborhood.
Yeah.
People online started comparing them to the Grove Street families.
From Grand Theft Auto, the video game.
Yeah, from GTA. So this, like, virtual comparison, even though it's totally superficial, it kind of added to their online presence, or I guess their name recognition.
That's bizarre. A real gang getting linked partly to a fictional video game just because of colors and perceived size. It just shows how pop culture bleeds into weird places.
Totally. It speaks to how these online narratives can shape perceptions, you know?
Definitely. So they're getting more known partly through TV, partly through this weird gaming link. But what actually caused the Hidden Valley Kings to sort of break off and become more independent from the main Queen City Kings group?
It looks like the original philosophy or structure of the Queen City Kings started to weaken. A really big factor seems to have been the suicide of their leader, a guy known as Korn, usually spelled with a K.
Okay. That would definitely shake things up.
Absolutely. A major blow to, cohesion, direction. And then after that, his half-brother apparently got into the rap scene, seemed to kind of step back from the gang stuff.
So a leadership vacuum, basically.
Pretty much. That vacuum, maybe a shift away from the original ideas, seems to have opened the door for the individual sets, like Hidden Valley, to just kind of do their own thing more.
The glue fell apart.
Yeah, seems like it. Allowed them to operate more autonomously.
And did their colors change then as they became more independent? You said the main group used black?
Right. While the Queen City Kings lean towards black, the Hidden Valley Kings specifically are now known for using black bandanas primarily.
Okay, black bandanas for Hidden Valley. So early 2000s, they're becoming their own distinct thing. What were they focused on, activity-wise?
The Wikipedia source points mainly to selling narcotics for profit back then. That was the core hustle.
Drugs, basically.
Yeah. But it's worth noting that Korn, the earlier QCK leader, apparently had a broader view. He was quoted saying something like, "There are many hustles outside of selling drugs."
So maybe it wasn't only drugs, even early on.
Possibly.
Mm.
It suggests maybe a wider range of illicit activities were always kind of on the table, or at least envisioned.
And they did that thing with the zones too, right? Trying to organize the neighborhood.
Oh yeah, that's another bold move. They apparently tried to divide the Hidden Valley neighborhood into 3 zones.
3 zones.
Yeah, deliberately mirroring how the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department organizes things.
Wow. That suggests a real ambition for control, like setting up their own little administration or something.
It certainly does, a strategic effort to really dominate their turf, maybe even create a kind of shadow governance.
And who are they clashing with back then? Any major rivals in those early days?
According to the source, not a huge list of established enemies at that point, but locally, right there in the Hidden Valley neighborhood, they were known to tangle with the United Blood Nation.
Ah, the Bloods. So local turf beefs, mainly.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
Probably disputes over territory, maybe drug spots, influence within that immediate area.
Got it. So their home base was definitely Hidden Valley, Northeast Charlotte. Any other spots?
That was the main stronghold, for sure. The source mentions a smaller presence in some apartment complexes over on West Boulevard as well, but Hidden Valley was the core.
Okay. Now, there was a specific incident, wasn't there, in November 2005. The source highlights it as being incredibly brutal and really triggering a big police crackdown.
Yes. That event seems to have been a real turning point.
It was.
It's exceptionally violent.
What happened? Walk us through it.
Okay, so it kicked off on November 28, 2005. Some Hidden Valley Kings members confronted a rival drug dealer at Eastland Mall.
Eastland Mall. Wow.
Yeah. Apparently, the argument was over taxes. The dealers supposedly refused to pay the Kings for operating on what they considered their turf.
Okay.
Things escalated fast, and there was actually a shootout right there in the mall food court.
A shootout in the food court. That's terrifying. Public space? Incredibly dangerous.
Absolutely. The dealer managed to get away from the mall, but the Kings weren't letting it go. They pursued him
Kept chasing him.
relentlessly.
Wow.
Later that same night, they apparently lured him to a motel on North Tryon Street, tried to ambush him again.
Another damped.
Yeah. But again, he managed to escape. This time it turned into a high-speed car chase. Shots fired between the cars.
Jeez. This sounds like something out of a movie, but obviously deadly serious.
Totally. The chase ended when the victim's car crashed into a telephone pole.
Oh, man.
He tried to run, get away on foot into a residential area nearby, but the Hidden Valley Kings caught up to him.
And then?
And then they shot him, point-blank range, with an AK-47 assault rifle.
An AK-47, just execution style.
Pretty much. The sheer brutality of it, using that kind of weapon. Did the sources mention how they even got weapons like that? Was that common for them?
The source doesn't detail weapon acquisition, but it does stress that this specific murder, its violence, was the absolute trigger for the Charlotte-Mecklenburg police. It forced their hand.
You can see why. That level of violence couldn't be ignored.
No. So the police formed a special unit, right? Specifically to go after the Hidden Valley Kings.
Exactly. A dedicated special operations unit. Their sole mission was to target this gang and dismantle it.
And it wasn't like a quick raid the next day. They took their time.
No, they invested serious resources. For almost 2 years, this unit was digging deep, gathering intelligence, using informants, running surveillance, really building a case.
2 years. That shows how seriously they took it.
Definitely. It all culminated on March 30th, 2007. That's when they launched a massive raid.
The big takedown.
Yeah. Over 100 officers involved, apparently. Task force agents. They arrested over 20 identified Hidden Valley Kings members.
Including leaders.
Including key leadership figures, yeah. Hit them with a whole slew of charges.
So a major blow to the gang's operations at that time.
A very significant blow.
But looking beyond that specific incident and raid, the Wikipedia entry lists the range of criminal activities they've reportedly been involved with over time. And it's quite a list.
It really is. It covers a lot of ground, unfortunately. We're talking drug trafficking, obviously, but also extortion, racketeering, robbery, murder, burglary, assault, battery, illegal gambling, car theft, sexual assault, petty theft, vandalism, prostitution, shootings, fraud, grand larceny, and conspiracy to commit various crimes.
Wow. That's extensive. It paints a picture of a group involved in basically any illicit activity that makes money or asserts power.
Pretty much. A very broad and concerning range of criminal behavior.
And aside from the local clashes with the Bloods, who else were their main rivals, other gangs they conflicted with?
The entry names a few others. The Black Guerrilla family, the United Blood Nation, who we mentioned for the local stuff, but also the Crips, and another group called the Sigmas.
So conflicts with other established gangs beyond just their neighborhood turf. Were these fights mostly about territory or other things too, like drug markets or just general bad blood?
The source doesn't really detail the reasons for those rivalries, just lists them as known adversaries. It could be any combination of those things, really. Competition is usually at the heart of it.
Right. Okay, and one last piece of the puzzle. The colors. We said the Queen City Kings use black, Hidden Valley uses black bandanas, but they're strongly linked with green and gold too. Why those specific colors?
Yeah, that seems tied directly to the Hidden Valley neighborhood itself.
How so?
Well, the actual sign for the Hidden Valley neighborhood, it's green. And on top of that, Hidden Valley Elementary School's colors are green and gold.
Ah, okay. So they basically adopted the neighborhood's own colors as part of their identity.
It really looks that way. A deliberate choice to visually represent their home base.
Yeah.
Makes them distinct from the broader Queen City Kings black.
Got it. So wrapping things up a bit, we've gone from these kind of surprising Chicago roots and that really bold claim on the Queen City nickname through their local evolution, the impact of things like that Gangland episode, the weird video game connection,
Yeah, that was strange.
right up to the really serious criminal activities and that major police crackdown after the 2005 murder. It definitely gives a much deeper and frankly darker picture than just hearing the name Hidden Valley Kings.
Absolutely. It shows how complex these things can be. Local factors, wider cultural stuff, the grim reality of gang violence, and the police response. It all gets tangled together.
It really does. And that kind of leads to a final thought for everyone listening to maybe chew on. How much do these really specific local things, like the color of a neighborhood sign or the school colors combined with these unexpected cultural things, like a video game reference, actually influence how a group like this develops and how it's seen?
That's a great question.
What does that tell us about, community identity, local pride, and how those things can get twisted or co-opted in complex, sometimes dangerous ways? Think about that mixed local history, pop culture, crime. How does it all interact to shape something like the Hidden Valley Kings?
Yeah, definitely something to think about. That interplay is fascinating and often pretty disturbing.